We've often equated the amount of time a student sits in a classroom to be a proxy for whether or not they've learned something, but we know that's far from the case. If a student needs more or less time to grasp a concept than the traditional education system allows, they're out of luck in many cases. What happens, though, when we rethink the relationship between time and learning? How might we create more equitable and student-centered learning environments by viewing time as the variable and holding learning as the constant instead? I sat down with Dr. Marcus Belin, principal of Huntley High School in Huntley, Illinois, to talk about the opportunities afforded to his teachers and students by employing a competency-based learning approach. Let's listen into the conversation. Well, hello and welcome to the Pondering Possibilities series with Education Elements. I'm Drew Shantz, Senior Design Principal. Today we're talking all about competency-based education, and I'm excited to be joined by Marcus Belin, Principal of Huntley High School in Huntley School District just outside of Chicago, Illinois, to discuss the possibilities provided by rethinking the relationship between time, accountability, and learning. Marcus, we're so glad to have you here. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about yourself and your district?
Absolutely. My name is Dr. Marcus Belin, principal here at Huntley. I have a school population at the high school of about 3,000 students. We are a unit school district, so all of our schools feed up here to the high school, which really allows us some systemic growth in terms of how we meet our students' needs and be able to get them what they need as they progress through our educational system here. We just recently started CBE just 3 years ago. We are in our third year and started a program that rolled up from our freshmen all the way up until our seniors. This year, we're putting a capstone onto our program. So just super excited about the opportunities that will bring. And I'm sure just through some of the questioning that you have, Drew, we will get into some more of this a little bit deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing that, Marcus. We've been really fortunate to work with your school on competency-based education for some time now, and I think our listeners can really learn a lot from your experience and what it might take to get started on this path. So to start off, talk to me about, your school in this instance, before you began pursuing competency-based learning approach.
Yeah, so back in 2011, and this is, I'm going to be honest, this is prior to me because I actually came in at year one of implementation for CBE. So a lot of what I'm going to share is prior knowledge to what I have and a historical relevance to your question. And so we, back in 2011, started a blended learning program. Blended learning gives us the ability to, of time and place, and not having our students have to sit in front of a teacher for a 47-minute class period to do an assignment or do collaboration or group work that they can do outside of the classroom, so they have the ability to come and go from school. It's a very open campus, and it allows our students to go to the local coffee shop and work on a project and be able to come back on the days that they need. Additionally, being able to sit with the teacher and do smaller groups because the teacher is still available. So we went from traditional education to adding in this blended option. We started with 100 students, and now we have just about 2,600 students that take at least one blended course throughout their time here. That progressed over the last 10 years, bringing us to current. And when we added in CBE, we added just kind of that third track of learning that allowed for place and time and pacing of the learning targets and competencies, and showing us a certain level of mastery through performance assessments, which was a little bit different than traditional. And then competency is just the full enchilada, if you will, of our paths of learning. So it's been a progression, and it's been something that we have learned to grow from and adapt to and figure out how CBE works within our current model to challenge the status quo of traditional thinking and traditional education.
So you touched on this briefly, but what were the indicators kind of before you began the CBE path that something needed to be done or needed to change, kind of as a progression from your blended learning approach? What were you hoping to accomplish by taking that next step and implementing a competency-based learning model?
Great question, Drew. We are actually a pilot school, or were a pilot school just 3 years ago. The state of Illinois decided to adopt a competency-based education model. There were 10 schools within the state of Illinois out of over 800 school districts in the state that came together to say, we're going to try this pilot in these 10 different schools. There wasn't a framework or a right way or a wrong way of doing it. It was more of, hey, school districts, depending on your demographics, your ability to provide. There was no financial guidance. There was nothing of that support. It was more of take this concept and grow it organically within your building, just depending on your demographics. And so all 10 of us did something a little bit different. Our program here at Huntley is not like the program at Peoria Public Schools or Belvedere. They had a different approach. We did more of an all-in model with our core classes that allowed our program to grow in our math, science, social studies, and English class, and for us to be able to like I said, roll up with those 4 core subjects. Whereas other people may have just taken their CTE classes, or they may have just done this in their math class. So we had the ability to really grow that based off of what the state had stated we were going to try. So we did some research, which linked us up with Education Elements and gave us the ability to explore competency-based education and figuring out how we can best implement this in a very robust yet appropriate way to move education forward as opposed to sitting within the status quo. It also, too, allowed us to travel to go to different schools across the nation to look at competency-based education and how they were doing it, because this is not a new concept that just came about. It was one that our state looked at and said, it's happening on the East Coast, it's happening down near the West Coast, and we have an opportunity to be able to try this.
With that context in mind, talk about how you began that implementation work and the supports that you were able to provide along the way. What were you excited to accomplish through the competency-based learning approach? And maybe what were you potentially nervous or apprehensive about?
Well, being a first-year principal at a school of 3,000, I was nervous about a lot of things, let alone starting an entire program that no one had any idea what it was going to look like and or be, and coming from my personal background of starting a charter school, starting a program, there's a lot of bumps, a lot of unexpected turns that you hit, not knowing what's around the corner. So I kind of went in this with the mindset of fresh eyes wide open. I actually, again, on a personal level, wrote my dissertation on competency-based education in a large public school setting. And I shifted my thinking to that because this was a program that was here in this building. It was something I would be closely tied to. So I quickly jumped in and got to do a lot of research. So I understood the concepts of competency-based education early on, which helped me ask some certain questions, right? And push some thinking in terms of philosophy. I think the biggest thing that we were really trying to figure out, which is still one we're trying to figure out, is pacing and allowing students to move at their own pace. When you say that to a teenager, they take that very literal, and they're like, hey, we're going to move very slow at the beginning because their motivation is just not there. And then they wait until the 11th and a half hour to decide that they want to move very quickly and try and get things done, which kind of degrades the integrity of what we expect the program to be, because students don't operate at the highest possibility of what they can do because they don't have the time to do it at this point. It's just more so getting the work done. So it was trying to figure out and trying to work through some of the details of how to support teachers of what is that happy medium of a pace where students can work at, so that teachers can start the year on day one with the same content that is being done in traditional and blended classes, and be able to end the year just as traditional and blended classes, so that students are prepared and ready to move to the next grade level and to the next level of learning.
So generally speaking, in reflecting back on these years, what are some celebrations or some things that have gone really well, or changes that you've seen in your school as a result of implementation?
Some of the positives: one, we made it to year 4. They say typically in building and growing a program, it usually takes 3 to 5 years for a program to become established, depending on the amount of work and focus that's put into the program. We actually determined that we were going to do 3 years of core content, and then our capstone class, our what we call Vanguard, is our senior year, which allows our students to kind of bring all of what they've learned in terms of a culminating project, which will complete the entire progression of our competency-based program. So we reached year 4. Another win is we have students who are in the program that, for example, I'll use math as an example. We had some students who came in that started in Algebra 1. They progressed at a very fast pace because they understood the concepts and were meeting the competencies at a very quick rate. Needless to say, as that student moved very quickly and started progressing at their own pace, their 3-year math requirements were done in less than 2 years. And so this gives them ability to take higher level math courses. This gives them the ability to take more electives and things that they want to do to be able to craft their path for, like I said, life after high school. So I think that's some of the positives for sure that we see, is that kids being able to utilize pace, to not be held back, and have the opportunity to do more in such a limited time. There's a part of our program that focuses just on the academics, of course, and the core classes, but then we weave in the habits of work, life, and learning, and that those habits are focusing on, again, like that social emotional, those habits of like organization and integrity and communication and so forth. And so some of those key areas that are just pillars of life that we have to be able to use and know how to use effectively, we weave that into the content. Whereas in a traditional class, you go to class, a typical test, you sit at your own desk, you fill in a Scantron, a bubble sheet, or you take your test individually. Sometimes our performance assessments allow students to collaborate together and do a group project. And so giving students the ability to work in a collaborative environment is really what we do in most areas of work. Unless you're going into a profession that is I'm sitting at a desk and I'm working in a silo, we're trying to educate kids on how not to work in silos, because life after high school, much of what you see now is collaboration. If a kid wants to go work at Google, for example, they have the ability to try that collaboration piece and that communication piece here, because the program is built for that. Like I said, the biggest piece, and I talk about this in this question a lot, is just that collaboration. It's amazing to see students to be able to work with each other, which was a challenge during a pandemic, and having kids on Zoom and just being able to put them in breakout rooms. It's a challenge to do that as opposed to being face-to-face where students have the ability to be able to work with each other and grow.
Yeah, the pandemic really threw a wrench into a lot of plans, but it sounds like you were able to kind of adapt and kind of lean on the authenticity that this program provides for the learning experience, as well as the holistic approach that it takes to meet students as people, like you said, and as learners, versus just names on a roster sheet. So that sense of collaboration and community that you've been able to establish is really powerful. So I'm wondering what advice you might give to another school or district who's ready to start rethinking the learning experience to be more competency-based.
A couple things. One, it's going to take time. As educators, we go into certain things thinking that we know, like, okay, cool, we'll model this off of this piece, or we'll take this program and we'll try to emulate this program here. Like, it's going to take time to build. And before you even sit down and figure out the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, you just need to sit down and first begin with, what is it? Start with the what. What is it, and what do we as a school or a school district want to do and want to be? And what do we want our students to gain from this experience when they either get ready to graduate, or if they're elementary or middle school, to make it to that progression to the next grade level? What is our outcomes for them? So you got to think from that standpoint of starting with the what first, and then I think the how comes a little bit down the road. The second thing is really dedicating and devoting some time to oversight of growing the program. I'm gonna be honest, that's one of the challenges that we have, is having someone who specifically can focus on competency-based education and our approach. Because we did an all-in model, we have 12 teachers and we have just about 300 students that are in the program. And with that becomes a lot of growth of teachers, the professional development. What do teachers need? How can we train them to adapt in a competency-based model? Building performance assessments that are authentic and in line with what we're doing traditionally. Because we're changing the mindset of teachers, they need coaching, they need support. And so it's being able to put in some support structures that are not going to let your program fail, because the consistent professional development for staff is not there. So it's definitely beefing that up and allowing those resources to be available for teachers. The one thing that I will tell schools who are on the fence is that, for me, my motto as a high school principal is that I have 4 years to create the best opportunities for learning for our students and growth for our staff. Our staff are going to be here and continue to be here. Our students have 4 years. And if we sit and we wait to change education because we believe that this is good for kids and we don't move forward with that, then we're holding ourselves up, we're holding our educational system up, and we're doing a disservice to our students because we're waiting because of our level of comfort, when our kids can benefit so much from the great things that they're able to do, the skills that they're able to learn, and the mistakes and failures that they're able to make in our care. As opposed to going out and learning this firsthand post-high school. So if we believe that it's best for kids, we believe it's a program that can help grow students in a great way, both on the social emotional side and the academic side, then why not try it? We got to be able to jump, and we got to be able to get started in the work, because if you don't start, you can't finish anything.
That's such a powerful testament to not just the power of making these sometimes really seismic shifts in the learning experience, but also a testament to you and your leadership, Marcus, at Huntley High School. And I think it's just really remarkable, some of the things that you've been able to accomplish. I'm wondering if you could just give our listeners a little bit more information about you and your districts in terms of where they can go to see some of this stuff in action, social media, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. Where can they find you?
Absolutely. We are, of course, on social media, on Twitter at Huntley HS. Our school district is at District DIST 158. You can also go to www.district158.org or www.district158.org/HHS. You can get a hold of us and check out our programming. All of our stuff is on our website. I have a very solid team, and I'd be remiss if I didn't give a huge shout out to Shelly Kish, our Associate Principal of Curriculum Instruction. But she is a great asset and a resource to be able to connect with for those who are interested. And just reach out to us. We pick up the phone. We talk to people.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Marcus. It's been a pleasure, and all the best to you, your teachers, and your students.
Well, thank you, Drew. It's always a pleasure.
Speaking of learning more, you can find out even more about our approach to competency-based education by clicking into the resources in the show notes. There, you'll find lots of information, including a checklist for preparing your school or district for making competency-based shifts. Well, that's all the time we have for now. Be sure to check out our other episodes in this series to learn more about how Education Elements has been working with districts across the country to create more equitable, responsive, and student-centered organizations, teams, and classrooms. Take care, be well, and happy learning.